Welcome back to the Centered on Buffalo podcast. We are joined by a friend of the show, and that's our favorite, Sal Capaccio. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Always great to catch up with you.
It is. So we're coming off of a busy draft weekend. I know you had a ton going on. Thursday night, we were talking, you were in the media room all night, just doing coverage, getting no sleep. What was the feeling? What was the vibe in the media room as the Bills traded twice out of the first round?
Well, I think the vibe in the media room was kind of the same as it was from fans when the initial trade happened at 28, which is you see the Bills trade the pick and you're like, okay, they're trading down. Not completely unexpected. I mean, I think, let me tell you, in the media room, we know it's going to be a long night. We know the Bills are going to pick in the 11 p.m. hour at some point. And there's a lot of talk of what if they don't pick at all? What if they trade out of the first round? Like, we're going to be here all night. And it's not as much for me. It's the TV people it matters to mostly, right? Because they have these timings and, the draft is on and they got to go live and all that. I don't care as much, but I get it from their standpoint. They're trying to do their job. But when it happened, you're like, okay, well, looks like that. And then the Chiefs come up on the screen and you're like, holy cow, they're trading with the Chiefs. Wow, that takes a lot of you-know-what from Brandon Beane to be able to do that. So the reaction was the same. And there were people in the media room going, all right, well, you traded with the Chiefs. And there were others going, I can't believe you just traded with the Chiefs. What are you doing? And it's the same, I think, from fans. And then when then Eric, you realize, oh, wait, but the Chiefs still have a pick in this round. So the Bills are still picking in this round. And then we're like, okay, now you go back into that mode of, okay, they're going to, Xavier Worthy goes, we got to have that conversation, but now you got to get ready for the Bills pick. Then they trade out of the round. They all come together. And now we're back to, oh, here we go. Spent all night here. They didn't pick anything.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. At about 9:15, I let my kids watch kind of the first part of the draft, and it's always fun. And it's interesting having, this conversation with my kids who are 6 and 8 and trying to understand the draft and who can be drafted. And when you're already in the NFL, then you don't get drafted. And the kids are like, well, are the Bills going to draft Josh Allen again? I'm like, we already have him. He's under contract. So I went to bed at about 9:15. And my decision was, I don't know that I'm going to stay up past midnight anyways. I don't know if I could even make it up past midnight. So I'll get my normal 4:45, 5 a.m. wake up, and I'll still be able to do my normal Bills coverage. I'll be prepped for my interview with you the next day on WGR and the radio, and that's going to be better to fit my schedule. So I went to bed and woke up with a frenzy of text messages from buddies and Bills fans and people that are just invested in the organization. And there was a lot of shock there. But to me, we talked about this prior to them picking Coleman, that they likely had their guy, and it wasn't Leggett, and it wasn't Worthy, and that's okay. These guys spent all year round prepping, and they know what they're doing. The Bills have a front office that teams are continually trying to poach from. The reputation around the NFL is very strong, and I have a lot of respect for them as well. So it appears that their guy was Coleman, and they assumed we can get him at 33 and we can stockpile some draft picks. And so when you look at that, do you assume that Coleman was their guy all along and they knew they could get him there, or they were simply looking for better value?
I think they were looking for better value and probably had a few guys in mind that they were okay with. Maybe if Coleman goes 32, maybe Leggett goes 33. But I do think they really liked Coleman. Obviously, you're not making the pick, and you're probably trading down again, because there were rumors right after that the Patriots really liked Coleman. And there was another team, I can't remember off the top of my head, that really liked Coleman. And they were willing to, I read something yesterday that the Patriots called the Bills to trade with them at 33, and the Bills said no. So that tells me they did like Coleman, right? So it probably, I guess the question would be going into the draft, like how much do they like Coleman compared to the top guys or versus that next tier? I wouldn't say their guy was Coleman going in versus the top guys necessarily, if one of them were to fall and they could have a chance to get him. But I do think in the next tier, he had to be the top guy, because otherwise you don't have any problem kind of trading down, really kind of guessing your best guess that the Chiefs aren't going to take them, and we still have a really good shot at them.
Let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors, and that's Dan O's Seasoning. Dan O's is your game day secret weapon. Crafted with natural ingredients and bursting with flavor, it's the ultimate touchdown for your taste buds. Get in the zone with Dan O's. Is it unfair to Coleman that for the rest of his career, he will be compared to Worthy and Leggett? Because Bills fans were so invested in this draft. And I say this as a former offensive lineman, it's exciting when your team appears to be in the market for a receiver. We know those guys' names from Saturdays. And unless you are an avid college football fan, you probably don't know all the top O-lineman. If the Bills were in the market for an interior defensive lineman, it wouldn't have been as exciting. But with this, what the experts say is a strong wide receiver class, the Bills fans were so invested. You give up the pick, and the Chiefs obviously draft Worthy. Then the Panthers draft Leggett. Is it unfair that Coleman is going to be directly compared to them at least these first few years in the league?
It is unfair, but it's going to happen, right? So, right. I mean, that's what everybody's going to do, but it is unfair to him specifically. I don't think it's unfair to the Bills organization because they're the ones that made the deal with Kansas City and said, we'll let you take Worthy. We're going to go down and we're going to take Coleman. And that's a choice Brandon Beane made. So Brandon Beane's going to live with that now for, however long this plays out. And if Xavier Worthy goes to Kansas City and just massively smashes it, and Coleman really doesn't, that's something that's going to be a talking point for a long time. Now, there is something to be said for Worthy's a better fit in Kansas City than he might have been in Buffalo, and Coleman a better fit in Buffalo. I get that if you want to make that argument. But Brandon Beane's now, he's taking this risk that's not going to happen. The reverse could be true. If Coleman smashes in Buffalo and Worthy really kind of doesn't become the player that the Chiefs hope that he can become as a first-round pick, then Brandon Beane deserves all of the flowers thrown his way and saying, you made the right choice with the value. I think it's super interesting.
It is going to be. And to me, when I'm looking back at, Brandon Beane's time as a GM, this pick may be as scrutinized moving forward as potentially as a Josh. I understand you're going after your franchise quarterback, but you had other options. Lamar Jackson was still on the board. You didn't go up high enough to get Darnold or Mayfield. You picked them in ahead of, Rosen. We all know how that draft worked out, and it worked out very well for the Bills in that instance. It's going to be very interesting to see moving forward. And in this day and age of quick takes, it's not going to be, hey, let's look back 4 years from now and compare this. It's going to be the first few games of this season. It might even be in the preseason if Worthy takes the top off the defense or breaks a big play. It's going to be, oh, we told you so. Look what the Chiefs now have in Worthy. But when you saw Keon Coleman's name come across the board for the Bills, what were your thoughts? And as you've dug in on him, covered him through the weekend as a player, what are your thoughts on the Bills selection there?
Okay, so let me take it back to the weekend when this happened, right? So Thursday night, they trade out. They have all day Friday to decide what they want to do. I think that's really big here when you think about the Keon Coleman selection because they must really have liked him, Eric, because they have the whole day to decide if they want to take him or not. They have the whole day to decide what they want to do. They could trade out of the pick. The fact that they waited and had all this time, they're on the clock. They control the board, essentially.
Right.
And they take Keon Coleman speaks volumes to me about what they felt about Keon Coleman, if that makes sense, right? So that's number one. Number two is I have to do a mea culpa here. I think I was as guilty as anyone of buying into what they really only were focused on was speed. And they wanted to get speed and they wanted to get playmaker. And I myself looked at Keon Coleman's 40 time at the combine and go, I'm going to put him over there. They're not taking him. And I didn't think about him that much. I kept saying, that's not their guy. They're not looking for that. But that does a disservice to what I think was truly happening, which is, sure, we want that, but it doesn't have to come in the form of just speed. And we got Curtis Samuel here, which we're going to move him around and do a lot of different things with him. And there's other ways to kind of maybe go out and get that. I think that's the mistake I made in assessing Keon Coleman. And now I go and look and go, wait a minute. Yeah, he ran a 4.61. Brandon Beane said he ran a 4.5 at his pro day. Yep. His GPS tracking in the 4.5s. Look at the way he runs with the ball in his hands when he's in the open field. Look at the dynamic playmaking ability he has outside of just running straight down the field. And I think I personally just didn't do a good enough job of saying maybe that's a guy they would really like. Because when you think about it at the end of the day, he is a guy that fits into their offense. They're replacing Gabe Davis. Now, that was a criticism from fans I got, which is, well, you're telling me they just drafted a Gabe Davis replacement? Yes, they needed to replace Gabe Davis. And they think they got a guy that's better and can be here as a 20-year-old, grow into a role that could even be way better than more than what Gabe Davis was. So absolutely they did. Brandon Beane said he's the X receiver. He's going to play a lot. That's the replacement for Gabe Davis.
Yeah, and when you look at speed, just running a fast 40 time has not correlated into success in the NFL. I heard it said the other day, so I hope this is factual, that there's been one receiver that's ran in the 4.2s to ever have a 1,000-yard season, and that's Santana Moss. And so we get enamored with these 40 times at the combine. Now, if you go off of combine numbers, the fastest through the gauntlet when you're actually catching the passes at the combine was Keon Coleman. He was the fastest one through the gauntlet at the receiver position. So is his 40 time, is remarkable as maybe some of the other guys? No, but he has playmaking ability to the point where Florida State has enough athletes that they could put anyone at returner. They have plenty of guys that run a faster 40 time, and at times they put him back there to make a play at punt returner. I got multiple texts after he got drafted by the Bills, one from West Durham who covers the ACC as hard as anybody, and he said, "You're absolutely going to love this young man. Wait till you hear his press conferences. He's been a treat to have on our shows over the years, and he's been fun to cover, and he's a heck of a playmaker." And then also EJ Manuel reached out to me and said, "Hey, you can use this." And I put it out on Twitter, and he said, "Look, this guy knows how to use his body. He can make big plays. He's an explosive receiver. I'd be excited about this pick if I was, still within the covering the organization like I am." So to me, and let me preface this, we've drafted other players from the ACC, and I've never gotten multiple texts, about a guy from other people that cover the league. So I'm excited about it. To your point, he adds some size, which we didn't have a lot of on the outside. He gives Josh kind of that playmaking, maybe jump ball type receiver. And I'm also excited to see what he can do with the ball in his hands. But now you go through the rest of the draft, you don't take another receiver, and just seeing even those pure numbers in that room, do you think this is a situation now, especially with the amount of draft picks that we stockpiled for the 25 draft and likely 3 compensatory picks? Do you think Brandon Beane goes out and tries to make a move for a veteran receiver?
I do, but I don't think it's going to be like a big swing type of trade. I just think the financials are too tough to do that, right? If you're talking about Brandon Ayuk, you're talking about Deebo Samuel, it's just too tough. These guys got to come with contracts. Now, you can do it once $10 million opens up on June 1st, cap-wise, because of the release of Tre'Davious White and how that works, they'll have that money. What I think, though, is really important here, and you just said it, they get all these draft picks in 2025. Think about right now, even outside of comp picks, they have a 1, 2 2s, a 3, and 2 4s right now, I believe. All right. Yep. And that's before the comp picks. And then they're going to get more comp picks. Okay. So you have that capital. Then you get the $10 million opening up on June 1st. What I think can happen here, though, Eric, is maybe later in the year, trade deadline, right? You're assessing where you are. Is there a receiver out there who he's on an expiring contract? It seems like we're not going anywhere. The Bills go, we're going to go add this guy. We can now afford him, and then we'll see where the chips fall as far as the contract. We can afford a 4th-round pick, a 3rd-round pick like they gave up for Rasul Douglas last year. That's where I think all of this might come into play. I don't know if it's beforehand. It really seems like Brandon Beane, he talked a lot about how they like their room, and it feels like they're going with this kind of receiver by committee approach. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. So I don't know. I mean, a veteran receiver, maybe there's 1 or 2 out there, but I don't think it's necessarily a big swing. When it comes to Keon, though, just real quickly to circle back to your point, the gauntlet, I do find it fascinating. You never see tall punt returners like this really that much, right? And that's what's interesting. And you watch that gauntlet, and that really is something. You can speak to this as a professional athlete. Like, it's one thing to run straight really fast, but it's another to really control your body to turn and run straight. And that's what he does well. Like, I described it on the air like a sobriety test, and you're trying to stay on a straight line. And he's staying on a straight line while he's moving this way and catching the ball, and bam, he's out the gate. And that I think is a special trait to have. And I think that comes from his basketball background and being able to watch his basketball highlights. He's not a guy that just goes up and get rebounds. He shoots, he dribbles, like he controls the ball in his hands.
Let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors, and that is Prime, the #1 sports drink on the planet. We are proud to partner with them. It's a sports drink that my kids love, and we love all the flavors, especially that new one, the strawberry banana. Yeah, he's an athlete. And look, I mentioned it earlier about the lack of production from guys that have ran 4.2s at the combine. Just having straight line speed does not make you a great NFL football player. I mean, you look at the most productive receivers around the NFL right now, most of them ran in the 4.4s and the 4.5s, but they're incredible athletes. And so, you're getting an incredible athlete in a Keon Coleman. And to me, I'm not worried in the least bit about his 40 time and him being able to separate, him be able to make explosive plays down the field. That doesn't mess with me one bit. So I'm excited about the selection. Maybe the one I'm most excited about, because I think he makes an immediate impact on this defense, is Cole Bishop, the safety out of Utah. The Bills took him in the second round. Brandon Beane said they were worried he wasn't going to fall to them at 60. They actually tried to trade up. They couldn't get up in the draft. And luckily, Cole Bishop falls to him, which I can't imagine as a front office doing work all year round and you're just impatiently waiting, and you're just sitting there thinking, do we do all of this work? Brought him in. Do we do all of this for him to go just a few spots ahead of us? But he falls to the Bills. This is a guy who's 6'2". He can run, another great athlete that I think is going to come in and make an immediate impact on this defense. He also played a ton in the box. He could be that dime guy throughout the season that we saw Jordan Poyer play last year. I think he's an immediate playmaker. What's your thoughts on the Cole Bishop pick?
I agree with you. He'll be an immediate impact player. The question is, does he start right away? Does he start over? Does he win a job over Taylor Rapp? I think that's the guy. I think Mike Edwards is probably going to start either way, but does he win a job? Does he beat out Taylor Rapp? I think that's a tall task. I think it's a lot to ask any rookie to come into this defense, learn the nuances of it, to get people set, all that. It's why they never use young safeties. Think about it. Even Mike and Jordan, when they signed, were 4 years into their career already, right? Taylor Rapp was 4 years in. Mike Edwards, 5 years in. And when those guys, any of them ever got hurt over the last 7 years, Keon Coleman comes in, Dean Marlowe comes in, guys that know the system. It's a lot to ask. So I go on Twitter that night and I'm like, I see Cole Bishop as initially like a Saran Neal type of replacement. And I got a lot of blowback. And what I meant by that was I wasn't trying to say they drafted a special teams guy. What I meant was he's a guy that can play on defense in certain packages and situations while he learns, and then play special teams and make an impact. Then eventually he'll start. Now, Eric, that might be week one. I don't know. He's going to start for this defense at some point in his career, probably sooner rather than later. But even if he doesn't start, I think the better way I should have phrased it was he could be immediately what Saran Neal never truly was for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. The guy that would come in and try and lock down Travis Kelce and play man-to-man defense because he's such a good athlete. He brings size. Yes, I know exactly what you're saying there. And to me, I got a text from one of Utah's coaches who I have a lot of respect for, and I'll say this. He believes he's going to come in and be a day one starter. He's predicting multiple All-Pros. And he says this. He said, this is my favorite kid I've ever coached in my life. And so, and he said, and don't sleep on his athleticism. I know he had his RAS, his relative athletic score, was high. And so, the book on him out there isn't that he's an unathletic white safety, but he's like, No. He's an incredible athlete. So it's going to be fun to see how that plays out, because they do have veterans back there that do have starting experience in this league in Rapp and Edwards, to see if he can crack the lineup immediately on that defense. If anything, I think he's going to be playing immediately situationally, where maybe it's third down, maybe it's obvious pass situations, because he can also defend the run, and he played in the box a good amount at Utah as well. When you look at the other Bills draft picks, and we're not going to go through them all because we're not going to spend all that time. Maybe we'll do another episode down the road, maybe breaking down some of the other guys that the Bills drafted. But is there a guy or two that really stood out to you thinking, okay, this is a guy going to make the team, and I really like this draft pick for the Bills?
My favorite pick is Javon Solomon, the defensive end edge rusher out of Troy. This is a school that had DeMarcus Ware and OC Umenyiora, and he beat their sack production. And those guys translated to the NFL. Now, I went back and looked at, where he was the leader in FBS sacks last year. I went back and looked at how that has translated. A lot of times it doesn't necessarily. I get it. I understand that. You're not guaranteeing anything. But what I really like about him is this is a kid that he grew up right near Tallahassee. He goes to Troy. You have Alabama right there. You have Florida State right there. We're in the NIL era. We're in the portal era. And even then, he decides, I'm staying here in the commitment I made to Troy. They made it to me. I made it. I said, why did you do that? He said, because being here, I got a sense of community and friendships and teammates. And I mean, that just screams Bill's DNA, right? First of all, but the production on the field, I think he has the kinds of traits that will. Now, what's interesting to me is, and I'm not saying he's going to be this guy who was a Pro Bowler and first round draft pick. Eric, he's the same size as Jerry Hughes, 6'2", 250. I think he can carve out a role for himself as a undersized pass rusher.
Yep, and give me him to lead the Bills in preseason sacks this year. He's going to be on a mission in those games, and he'll get plenty of reps. But those guys that are productive like that, I expect him to show up in a big way in the preseason. Hopefully he does earn a role on this defense. He's a little undersized. There's maybe no standout traits about him as far as arm length or anything else. So he falls in the draft. The Bills scoop up a highly productive player. I like the Ray Davis pick. I think he could play immediately. Brandon Beane bragged on his blocking ability. If he can learn the scheme, he could be a guy that could come in and be your blocking back. James Cook, Ty Johnson, even though Ty Johnson is more powerful in the past, they necessarily didn't use him in that role for third down to be your pass blocking back. I also think Ray Davis adds a little thump to that room. Ty Johnson brings it as well, but if Ty Johnson gets dinged up, you got Ray Davis who can play a role. I like the Dwayne Carter pick. I think he will be productive and he will earn a rotational spot on this defense. And then the center from Georgia, Van Pran Granger, I think he's a guy that if they don't love McGovern at guard or at center to start off in training camp, this is a guy that produced in the SEC. He's a guy that could come in and play between two guards like Torrance and McGovern, two really nice guards. And then Deion Dawkins gets another year with a guard next to him, which hasn't happened much at all in his career. That left guard position has rotated through, which that can affect an offensive line. So I like all those picks. And to me, the Bills had a productive draft. But look, it's like anything. We can give grades. We can talk about these selections. We got to see these guys on the field. And Brandon Beane will even tell you, look, sometimes it's a crapshoot. You can do all your homework on a guy. 100%. And look, it just doesn't work out, or injuries or whatever it may be. But let's wrap that up with the draft. I saw recently you had an episode on your podcast. It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, talking about the schedule release. Yes. And so this is a big deal for guys in the broadcast business like me and you. This dictates what our 5 months of our life are going to look like, whether we get to play golf on the road or whether we're going to be bundling up and spending New Year's or Christmas Eve in Chicago. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. When do you expect this NFL schedule to get released?
So the indication is, he said, Mike North, this is my favorite podcast I do every year. No offense to you or anybody else I'm on.
I love it.
I love it. It's amazing. We went an hour and a half, and every year we do that. And I'm like, I don't know what more we could ask this guy, but there's always new things to ask him. So we talk about international games, the scheduling, and the balancing of what they have to do, how they have to juggle the network partners and the streaming and all that. It's incredible. We asked him about revenge factor, Diggs, Houston. He said that game went from not a C to an A, but an A- to a solid A. Like, I expect that game to be highlighted somewhere on the schedule. Maybe not even primetime. Could be a CBS national window, 425, something like that. To answer your question about the release, he didn't give us an exact date, but generally it comes out on a Thursday, and he talked about the second week in May. I'm going to guess Thursday, May 9. That's what I'm going to guess. Could be Wednesday, May 8, Thursday, May 9. They generally don't do it on a Friday. It just seems like it's kind of, getting lost in the shuffle on a Friday night. You don't want to do that. So my guess is next week, Thursday, might be the schedule release, and then we'll find out. And by the way, Mike North said it right away. I asked him specifically, Eric, like there's a thought the Bills are taking a step back. What do the league schedule makers think about that? He goes, we're not taking our foot off the gas on the Bills. They're going to be featured a lot again.
Yeah, I love it. And look, Vegas hasn't taken their foot off the gas with the brake, foot off the brakes, or foot off the gas. Their thoughts on the Bills either. They still think their Super Bowl chances are high for this year. I don't see them taking a step back either. All right, the Kentucky Derby's this weekend. Do you have a horse? Do you have a pick that you can give the listeners for the Kentucky Derby?
Okay, I'm literally just doing by names here. Okay, I looked at the list, and I'm like, I don't care about the odds. What name do I like the best? Now, I will tell you, when I was a kid, my dad really liked to play the horses, and I was super into watching the Derby and other horse races all the time. I remember 1987, Ali Sheba was like my favorite. Like, it was awesome, right? And there was a time period in my life I could name like maybe 10 straight winners of the Derby, right? And like Winning Colors and all those horses. I got into it. I mean, I'm not into it that much anymore. I love that you are. It's awesome. You keep me into it a little bit. I pay attention to what you're doing with the Derby. I take a look at the names, and here we go. Now, I was going to go down to the 50-1 shot because West Saratoga sounds really cool, because I came up, this is all about songs for me, because I thought about it. What if I said, okay, ready? Apologies on your podcast here. West Saratoga, born and raised on the racetrack is where I spend most of my days. I like that, right?
I love it.
Okay, but that's not the one I'm going with. When I was in high school, we really liked the song Forever Young by Alphaville. Forever Young is a horse 10-1 odds to win the Kentucky Derby. There was also a Forever Young by Rod Stewart, which is a good song. So I'm going to go with Forever Young because of Alphaville and reminding me of my youth.
All right, I'll take it. I'll take the favorites. I'll take Fierceness or Sierra Leone. I'll be rooting for Sierra Leone. Buddy of mine, Brooke Smith, is one of the owners of that horse. Fierceness, he ran 10 lengths faster than any other horse in this field to date. And so, look, when you have a 22 horse field right now, there'll likely be a couple scratch. I expect it to be about a 20 horse field. Anything can happen. Anything can mess up a run. Fierceness is coming in with some serious momentum. Sierra Leone, he won the Louisiana Derby, won the Bluegrass, I believe, as well in Keeneland. So two kind of big top favorites. For those that are looking for betting advice out there, I'd put maybe, do an exacta or trifecta, one of the two of them on top, maybe put one of the two of them in second, and then long shots in either first and third, second and third, and just you're hoping that they hit the board with a couple long shots. You can make some money that way. Last one for me. Have you ever had a mint julep before?
Of course, yeah. I have friends that do a Kentucky Derby party every year, and we haven't been there. It was in Florida, but they would make mint juleps, and absolutely have had.
Okay, good deal. And then last thing, the 117 holes event is coming up. I believe you are emceeing the reception again, and we're going to put a link to that in the show notes if you want to support. I am going to be playing in it this year. I'll be walking from dawn to dusk. I'll be walking 117 holes. I'll have multiple caddies throughout the day that will be in golf carts, but me and 16 others, there's 17 of us. If you notice the theme, 17 players, Josh Allen. It's raising money for Oshad Children's Hospital. I have the Evan Wood Fund under Oshad Children's Hospital. Josh has the Patricia Allen Fund. That's coming up the day after Memorial Day, but we are competing to see who could raise the most money. So I'd appreciate anybody out there. Skip your donations for any of the other names in there, and you can funnel them all to me, and the link directly to my page is the one that's in the show notes.
That's May 28th at Craigburn is where you're playing, correct?
Yep. Exactly.
So everybody knows. That's right. Yes, I will be there that night. I'm very honored for the folks at Children's Hospital have asked me again to MC the dinner that night, and Josh, and it's such a great cause. And I'll be a part of your golf tournament as well. We can talk about next time that we're on the show and, MCing the event there as well. So it's super cool. I want to leave you with a great horse racing trivia question for everybody to know. I'll give you the answer, everybody, so people can go impress their friends at a bar. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Only time there was a Triple Crown winner in both baseball and horse racing in the same year. 1937, Joe Ducky Medwick in baseball and War Admiral in racing. Man o' War was related to War Admiral, by the way.
That is good stuff. That is great info. You only get that kind of stuff here on the Centered on Buffalo podcast. Sal, I can't thank you enough for your time. As always, I always brag on Sal. And look, he's going to be a friend of the show for a long time because, one, I love him. 2, he's fun to hang out with and talk ball with. 3, I think he's as informed as anybody, and the listeners love him. The videos and clips and the audio go wild when Sal comes on the show. So, Sal, thank you very much for the time, as always.
Much love, brother. Thank you.
Yes, sir.